Good evening, everyone. I'm Marian Missoni from the Film Society of Lincoln Center, and I'm also a member of the Selection Committee for New Directors, New Films. I want to welcome you to the 41st edition, although I'm hoping that for 99% of you, you've been here before, so I'm not welcoming you for the first time. And also to tonight's screening of Oslo, August 31st. A few years ago, we showed a film called Reprise here. That was heralding, yes, you can certainly, if you've seen it, you certainly give it your best. And we thought it heralded a great new talent, which is what we try to do here at New Directors. And it doesn't happen that often, but it does happen sometimes. It's happened with people like Paige Almodovar and Adam Agoyan, that we actually show the next feature film by a director, and it really, we feel like, proves our point. We were right, he's a great talent, and here he is again. And tonight is no exception. I'm very happy that the director is here with us once again to present his second film. I want to tell you that the film is going to open on May 25th, so tell your friends who couldn't make this screening that they'll be able to see it in May. I want to thank Strand Releasing, who are the U.S. distributor of the film. They're doing a great job, and they'll continue to do so. And Marcus is here. Thank you very much, Marcus. Okay, yes, you can thank him too. I always believe thank the distributors because they need our support as well. There you go. As you can see from the chairs here, we are going to be here for a Q&A afterwards, so please stay. I think it'll be very interesting. But right now, it is my great pleasure to introduce to you the director, who's going to make a small introduction, and then he'll be back later. Please welcome Joachim Trier. Joachim.
Thank you. Let me start by thanking New Directors, New Films for having me back and making me feel so young. And that'll keep me in denial for another couple of years. Well, here's another tale from the suburbs of Europe, Norway. This is a film that after I considered doing a lot of different things and wrote another film that didn't happen, and years went by, I decided with my group of friends and collaborators to do a film very quick, to do a personal piece and to try to be very intuitive and instinctive about it, and try to make a portrait of a character in a city I grew up in, Oslo. It's loosely based on a novel from France, written in the 30s, and for some paradoxical and strange reason, having that as a sort of Dumbo feather. You know how Dumbo, to make a Disney metaphor here, flies with a feather, and then after a while he can let go of it and fly on without it. That's sort of how I felt about the book. It's a controversial novel, but the paradox was through leaning on that and being inspired by that wonderful book, we were actually able to do something that were about Oslo today. I hope we managed to capture it. I am nervously awaiting your response. I'll be back for Q&A, and I'll be glad to answer any questions you might have, and I hope you enjoy the film. So thank you very much for coming this evening.
Please welcome again Joachim Trier. Joachim.
Thank you very much.
Okay, I'll ask a question or two, and then we'll throw it out to everyone here. Can you talk a bit about? It's based on a story, of course, that is not Oslo, but of course Oslo is the title. How much for you is the meaning of this film in the city of Oslo? For instance, if it had been if you'd set in another city, how different would the film have been? And talk about Oslo, is it a character in the film?
It's hard for me to imagine it differently because I chose the city I grew up in. It's a city where I have I went to school, fell in love, was heartbroken, I had the best and the worst of experiences. So, it's a place I know very intimately. Oslo is a kind of strange city in the sense that it's the capital of Norway, and I think a lot of people from around the country perceives that's a big city. But it's actually not so big, but it's expanding tremendously. So it's a city in change, and I was interested in capturing that sociologically, how gentrification, expansion, all those things are going on at the moment. And there's something wonderful about films, even though you make a narrative film and you feel that you should be grown up and tell a story, and you know, there's still this little, you know, childish thing in me about just documenting something. It's just fun to show something specific about something you know. Bicycling down a hill early in the morning in a particular street with a fire extinguisher, and showing it like the childish notion of doing that, and then showing it to someone else and seeing, did you get a response? Did that work for you? Did you feel that? You know, so there's something about doing that with your own, where you're from. It's almost like a hip hop ethos of representing something that is personal to you. So this process in this film was also about that to me.
Yeah, and it's interesting too, because in a lot of things you mentioned could be also, I see in New York City where I grew up and what I know, and so it's the idea, I think also the idea of a city and the gentrification in general, and it could be, you know, anybody could identify with the city where they grew up, and yet there are those particular things for you and anybody else that it might be in Oslo.
Yeah, I mean, I hope, I believe through being particular, you can also somehow perhaps touch on something that can communicate and make sense in a more general, you know, exposure to this film. Hopefully, I don't know. I had this strange thing with Reprise. My first film, I never expected it to travel. I always thought that I was sort of making it, as Buñuel would say, for my friends and my friends' friends. And you sort of cross your fingers and hope there are many. And then suddenly it traveled, and I met people in Turkey or New York or, you know, Latin America that said, "Oh, I know people exactly like that, and those were my friends," and that was a wonderful experience for me, but kind of unexpected.
Yeah, it's like your friends' friends. All of a sudden, they're all over the world. Let's see, questions. Anybody? No. Okay. Oh, I'm sorry. Yes, there you are. Could you talk about what you were trying to say with the piano when he plays the piano at the end?
Anders, the character is a multi-gifted guy. Obviously, he's quite resourceful, and we were trying to find a piece he could play where I was looking for something. It's a Handel piece that he actually plays that says something about his background, something he might have learned as a child or a young person. There's something about that piece that I think has a sort of childish simplicity about it, yet it's complicated technically to play. And to me, there's something tragic about someone who can't laugh at himself or have a self of acceptance about not playing something perfectly. Life is not perfect. No one's perfect. You know, you need to have an acceptance of that. And I think that's maybe the tragedy of this character, that he's unable to accept the inability for perfection in life or those high ideals that he carries. So somehow, I don't know, I don't want to explain too much, but there's something about that, not being able to pull that little piece of piano playing off that seemed right to me at that stage in the story.
He just stops.
Yeah.
Yeah, all of a sudden in the middle of it playing. Yes.
One of the reasons the movie works so well is because of that wonderful lead actor, who's not going to be familiar to any American audience. Can you tell me a little bit about that?
Can you talk a bit about your lead actor who plays Anders? And this viewer just thought that he's wonderful.
I'm so glad you asked that question. I'd love to talk about Anders. I think he carries the film, and I wouldn't have made it without him. I met him during the making of my first film, Reprise, and he's a very, very multi-talented person. In real life, he's a doctor, and as we speak, he's probably removing appendixes at a hospital. I mean, seriously, he's working as an intern at a hospital now. He was quite famous as a child in a role of a children's movie called Herman, the kid with no hair, which was he was 10 years old, and he experienced fame at an early age, and he hated it, and people were making fun of him at school, and he did other stuff. He's a musician, he's a doctor, he's published a book. So there's something really wonderful, almost like I would say a Renaissance man quality about Anders. His real name is Anders as well. So in approaching this film, I knew he had stuff in him as an actor that he hadn't properly maybe explored yet, places to go. And when I invited him into doing it, it was one of the first things we did. I decided I wanted to do this story. We wanted to do it quick. I sat down with my co-writer Eskil Vogt, and we decided to take Anders out for dinner. I mean, he's our friend, and we needed to have that final look at him. You know, will he be able to carry this story? And we took him out. It was an awkward dinner. We were kind of laughing. We didn't say why we wanted to see him. And the next day he called me and said, "You guys were so strange yesterday. What's going on?" I said, "Well, this is the thing. We really want to make a movie with you again. And would you take a break from your doctor, being a doctor, and come make a movie with us?" And I explained it to him. And I said to him, I think there's something about the way that he's so multi-talented in real life, and that we imagine sort of an alternative universe where all those wonderful abilities never came to fruition, or he weren't able to really fulfill any of that. And could he imagine how that life would have been? And we started from there and built it off aspects of his life. He does not have a history of addiction or anything, but still, I think he opened up to the part and based it on aspects of himself, and I'm very grateful for that. So yeah, I think Anders is the sort of pivot of this one.
And is he it sounds like he was the first one you just sort of locked in because you really had to. And did you have him in mind as you were writing?
Yes, because that's an important point actually. We hadn't written the script yet, so he was quite brave to get involved in this before he'd actually read the thing. What we did was we worked parallel with a lot of research. I invited old friends of mine who'd had rough lives into the process, and they came and shared some of their stories. We went to a lot of clinics for addicts, and Anders went in secretly into Narcotics Anonymous meetings, but he was so touched that he opened up in the middle of it and told them that he was actually doing research, and everyone was really nice to him and understood that he was genuinely interested in representing a character with these kinds of problems. So it was quite an interesting process. And so he actually came and inspired us when we were writing. So it's a good organic back and forth process there.
And talk a little bit about some of the other actors and your casting of them. And I don't know, from after Reprise, do you start to have sort of, a community of actors that you're going to be all working together, or did you sort of start from scratch?
Except for Anders, I did the same thing with Reprise. I did the sort of cattle call, I guess you call it in English. I saw around 1,000 people. I do extensive interviews. I have a team of great young directors that help me, sort of as assistants or casting people, and we meet actors that have experience, people that have no experience. The guy that plays Thomas, the best friend that he meets, and they talk for a long time on various benches in parks. He's one of Norway's most, I guess he has a literary show on TV where he interviews writers. And there's something interesting about his ability to listen. He for example, he did a wonderful interview with Philip Roth where he told me prepared 20 pages of texts, but of questions, and they had a whole day together. But as he met Philip Roth, he felt impolite sitting there with paper, so he's kind of put it away, and he went off his memory and led the conversations to all the things he wanted to talk about, and it worked out very well. And to me, that is kind of like acting. It's what he does in these scenes. He kind of memorizes the text, and then we leave it a little bit open, a little bit of flexibility, and he listens and he responds. And I think he's a great actor as well, but he has no prior experience of acting either.
Yes. You said that you rushed to finish the movie. How long did it take, and in effect, writing the script, and how long did shooting take?
It took about a year since we started the process of writing until we premiered in Cannes. So it was actually a year. And I'm such a fan of Sidney Lumet and Woody Allen, people that can work fast, and I feel so slow. So I was so happy that we managed. Maybe I'll never do it again, but to make a film in a year. Not that matters, it's the result that matters. But to us, making it, the process made us more, we had to trust our instinct, be more spontaneous. There's something about working quick that's very healthy sometimes. With my first film, we rewrote the scripts for 4 years. You get tired of your jokes and you write them again and again and again, and then you go back to the first draft and you say, those jokes are actually okay, you just keep reinventing the same thing. With this one, we only kind of swift, went straight there, got into the shoot very quick, and we were fortunate with the financing in Norway that we're allowed to do that. It was a rare opportunity.
Yes, all the way in the back.
Did you ever at any stage consider that others might end up in a better place in the end than you did right now? Was it like a lot in your head that you would end up this tragically?
Was any time you thought of having it end differently, or was it always locked that it would end so tragically?
that was there from the outset. That's in the story. That's the sort of result of that process. It's a tragedy, and in a classical sense of dramaturgy, I think in a tragedy, catharsis can lie outside of it. It can hopefully, through going on this journey, quite deterministic journey with this character, I hope that people can take away a perspective on life that could be more hopeful than the one he sees. I'm not making films to show an idealized person, but this is also the truth, as I've experienced it in life, that this happens. But I would like to add, since you asked that question, that I've seen people that have had addiction and problems and depressions that have won those battles, and I know that there is wonderful hope in real life as well. And I've seen some of the strongest people I know have dealt with this in a different way, thank God. So, it's kind of, yeah, it's a tough one. But I think in movies, in stories, we should be allowed to explore the consequence of these choices as well. And I'm happy I was able to. It's tough with the sort of commercial state of cinema at the moment. You're really not allowed to make unhappy endings. It's very rare. So I don't know. I had this feeling that we had the finance. No one would fiddle with it. I felt, shit, we really got to do this and be hardcore with this one. I might never work under those conditions again. Who knows? So.
You brought this up again, the financing. Can you talk a little bit about the ease or difficulties, and I'm sure it's difficulties, of getting financing? Is it commercial money? Is it from institutions? I mean, I've been reading now. We always think in Europe, at least, there's like a lot of money for culture and for making films, but even lately, you're starting to lose all that money. So.
Norway's different. Actually, it's strange. We don't have a great sort of history of cinema in Norway. If I asked you all, you've probably seen Bergman, you've seen Roy Andersson, perhaps, you've seen Lars von Trier, Danish and Swedish directors. We haven't had sort of those fathers to kill in our. I'm saying that because I think it's okay. It leaves a space for opportunity. We don't need to rebel against someone. So anyway, but what is going on is there's an emphasis politically now in investing soft money into more auteur-driven cinema, and it's happening in Norway, and that's kind of a wonderful opportunity. Who knows how long it'll last? I'll make sure to try to make more movies quick.
That's why you have to keep making movies.
Yeah. No. So this is based off of some TV sales and some mostly government funding and people working for free and a lot of idealism and stuff. No one gets rich, but we make a movie and we're very proud and happy about that. So I think Norway right now is an interesting place. Now it's up to the artists to deliver, to do something interesting, I guess.
Well, you're helping with that. Yes, over there.
At the beginning of the movie, you had some very interesting war footage from Oslo.
Yeah.
How did you get that?
At the very beginning, there was what kind of footage?
Archival.
Oh, I'm sorry. It's archival footage from Oslo. How did you get that?
I wanted, rather than to just make a film which was a psychological drama, which it also obviously is, I needed the context of the city, and I'm interested in the themes of memory and identity and place somehow. And so what we did was I did a lot of interviews with people and asked them, documentary interviews, just sound of people telling stories from their experience of coming to Oslo, growing up in Oslo, living in Oslo, memories. And I asked them to kind of state it as in I remember. So that would sort of be the system of that, of what you hear. And then I started looking for personal footage, little moments from films that I enjoy, that I love in film history. There's a moment from my grandfather's film, Remonstrance, that was actually screened here a few years ago, just a man running down the street. I was trying to make a sort of a homage to what I thought were good and or personal or interesting images from the city of Oslo. And I found that the most wonderful material I actually found was sort of communal information movies about there was one about the ambulance, or there was one about the tramways. I mean, stuff like that, just really stuff that no one had seen that we found, and it was wonderful to be able to just throw it in there and create something.
I particularly like, which may not be that old, of the building coming down and the camera attached to the building, it seemed.
Yeah. It's a typical Norwegian thing. It looks very dramatic, but what it was, they tore down. I mean, I'm telling this story in New York. It's kind of weird. We had
when they tear down buildings like that, it's on the news. I mean, constantly.
But the thing is, in Norway, in the area that I grew up, there was one tall building, the Philips building. So one day they announced they would tear it down. and very Scandinavian. Everyone showed up on a Sunday at noon, and they tore it down. Everyone clapped their hands, and the year after they built the exact same building again. So what looks very dramatic, but I thought that was very Scandinavian. So I thought that also was in there, but I know it looks dramatic, and I thought it's an overture. It's an opening of a film, and we're watching the implosion of a building from the inside. And I found that that's an interesting shot to start the story, the rest of the story with.
Well, all of those things in the beginning, we were talking about before, about the idea that for you these are things that speak Oslo, but that they are also just things that to us may speak city and home, and that makes it universal.
I hope it's somehow there's a sense, or images can be expressive in unexpected ways, and this is what we're sort of playing with constantly when making movies, I think. Yeah.
Oh, yes, here.
People in his life were so nice to him, so loving, and yet there was rarely a glimmer of hope in his eyes. Did you speak with Anders the actor about what it was like? Did he have to deaden himself?
And this is also a question about Anders, the actor, and how, because the other characters are all so good and kind to him, but he's almost like deadened to them in his eyes. Was this a choice that you had him make?
Yeah, Anders, it's about a character who has this sort of very self-destructive integrity. Someone who can kind of see, he has high ideals and feels very ashamed for his actions in his past. So he's above and underneath and not able to be sort of in the middle or functioning. That's an interesting thing, I think. And Anders explored that also through. He was in a tough place for 6 months, like really as a person doing this role. And often in the evenings after shoot, he would kind of, because he held back a lot of crying and emotion, and he kind of tried to suppress it to create a nerve or a dynamic for the character somehow. And he really sat in the evening sometimes with very distraught and sad. And I think it was really tough on him. And he's fine now. And his wonderful girlfriend was very supportive. I thanked her on the premiere. I think she's the one that had the hardest time making this film, living with him for that period of time. She was very patient.
I think you've got a broken thing.
Yeah, I know. I'm trying not to lean too much on it. It's like, it's very symbolic.
These
The
Q&As are very dangerous.
The director's chair is about to fall apart. Hooray for auteur cinema.
Yes.
I'm interested in several of your answers. You allude to the camaraderie of filmmakers in your country, and you talk about some other Scandinavian countries that have more of a film history. And sometimes you say that's very Scandinavian. If you could, in some way, differentiate what it's like, the filmmaking community in Norway, as opposed to in some of the other Scandinavian countries, but what is also the commonality when something is Scandinavian as opposed to Norwegian?
Thank you, Bob. Yes, and it's a question. Yes, if you can speak to, because you talk about how some things are different, some things are the same. If you can talk about like Norwegian cinema and filmmakers in particular, as opposed to other Scandinavian countries, but also what are the commonalities that you may see?
I lived in London for a while, and I remember that I had a film theory teacher who had done some studies on Scandinavian culture, and she said, "Oh, Norway, oh, you're so fucked up. You got guilt culture from being a Protestant country, and you have shame culture from being Vikings. Like, here I am. Oh, I fail. This kind of so we're messed up. I don't know. I think Scandinavia. The ideal that there's a lot of guilt around for sticking your head out. There's something there going on, and I think the Danes and Swedes have been better at having people who have dared, like Trier, be controversial, and another guy with the name of Trier is quite controversial at times, But we also need people to stand apart, and art should be a space where we are allowed to try thoughts and test things out to create this discourse, and I think that's something that in the quite pragmatic culture of Scandinavia is sometimes a conflicting thing. You know, what's the space of art and how should we treat it? There's this idea of something being egalitarian and something being very democratic, which is wonderful politically in many ways, I would say. But sometimes for art, you need to stand apart and accept a lot of radical difference. So I think there's something, this discussion going on there. Sorry if I'm being a bit academic, but I also, but just traditionally, the difference I think is cinematically between Norway and Denmark and Sweden is just that they've had some individual auteurs. I don't really believe in national art, you know. You could talk about it slightly generally and try to see tendencies, but it's about the individuals, you know. It's about people doing their thing with their group, obviously. It's not just about one person, but and I think that they've been good at that. But also remember, mind you, Denmark was one of the biggest movie exporters in 1911 and 1912, I think, in the world. Nordic Film as a studio is the oldest studio in the world still existing. And, you know, they would make a sad ending for Russia and a happy ending for America, and they would export their movies, you know. It's true, and that's, you know, so Denmark have incredible history of cinema. In Norway, it's very different. It's a small country, you know. We were a part of Denmark and then Sweden, and we you know, we were independent only a little bit more than 100 years, you know. So yeah, it's a very different, and then oil came in the 70s. And everyone looked to America in the 80s, and everyone wanted to be yuppies and cool and drive cars, and no one invested in culture. And, you know, this is the short version. But now slowly we're getting there. You know, we're trying to do different stuff. Anyway, don't quote me. I hope there are no Norwegians here. That was I felt that was a little bit rough and a little bit quick. So sorry about that. Yeah, it's more complex. Sorry, I'm not great at the recent history in Norway. Sorry about that.
Okay, we have time for just one more question right here. I'm sorry, could you speak up a bit?
I thought one of the final scenes in the movie was where he goes into the restaurant alone for coffee and overhears their conversations. And I was particularly intrigued by the young girl's list of things that she wanted from her life. And I wondered if you could comment a little bit on what went into making that list.
This is about the scene in the restaurant when the young woman is talking about all the things she wants in her life. And can you talk about how did you create that list? Who created that list?
I did not create that list, and I wouldn't be able to. I'm glad you asked that question. I can give some credit to this girl. You know, we were working very quick, so it was like everything goes. You know, I was listening to the radio, and there's this thing on the internet, these blogs about 50 things I want to do before I die. And it's tremendously popular, just exploding at the moment. There are thousands of these lists out there. And amongst one of the most popular things that everyone around the world wants to do is to swim with dolphins. Should we call the film Swimming with Dolphins? That would be kind of dark with this character. So I listened to a radio program with this girl that read from her list, and I found it touching and kind of, I like things that are not, you don't know if it's completely silly or very, very deep, you know? And so we invited her to come and read her list in this cafe scene. And so she did. And I was shooting it, and I was thinking, are we making Teletubbies or Terrence Malick here? What am I trying? You know, is this great or not? It's kind of like sometimes you need to step back and not judge stuff and try to see if it can just organically fit in. And that scene is about that. It's about trying to look at Oslo, and some of it is documentary, some of it is planned, and it's sort of a mixture. It was interesting to do that scene, actually.
Well, unfortunately, that's all we have time for, and I'm sorry, but Joachim, thank you very, very much for this
Thank
film.
you very much for coming,
And thank
everyone.
you all
Thanks.
for your questions.